Germany's economic wise man slammed Merkel for costly coalition plans. Germany's wise man panel of economic advisers has warned Chancellor Merkel against striking costly deals in current coalition talks with the Social Democrats. They fear Germany's nascent recovery might be slowed. Social policy measures, which are currently being discussed in coalition negotiation between Merkel's CDU-CSU alliance and their likely junior partner from the Social Democrats, SPD, threaten to undo years of gains from painful labor market and social reforms. The so-called wise man panel of German economic advisers warned Wednesday. In their annual State of the Economic Report, which was titled Against Backward-Looking Policies this year, the economists described plans to introduce a national minimum wage, caps on rent increases, and higher pensions as a burden on future generations and hostile to growth. Reforms to the German labor market and social system unveiled by former Social Democrat Chancellor Gerhard Stuhler in 2003 and known as Agenda 2010 have been widely credited with boosting German competitiveness and paving the way for the country's recent economic success. Future challenges will be far more difficult to overcome if the Agenda 2010 reforms become diluted or reversed in some cases, the advisors said in the report. Speaking ahead of a fifth round of coalition talks on Wednesday, Chancellor Angela Merkel said she would take the warning seriously, although she might not be able to hit all of the demands raised by the experts. In their report, the panel of economic advisers also revised up its estimate for growth in Europe's largest economy. In 2013, Germany was expected to grow 0.4%, up from its March estimate of 0.3%, while in 2014 the rate of expansion would be 1.6%. The German government has recently predicted the growth rate in 2014 to reach 1.7%. Found sounds. You need good luck to record music in a Namibian desert. In an unusual African safari, South African electronic band GoodLuck took their studio into a Namibian desert to record their new album. The desert was better than a traditional studio. The desert is a desolate place, hot, dry, and far from civilization. But for GoodLuck, an electro-pop group from South Africa, it was also the perfect location to record their latest album. The band's three members, producer Ben Peters, lead singer Juliet Harding, and saxophonist Ravin Hensman, left their recording studio in Cape Town and drove to the deserts of Namibia this summer. They not only rediscovered their creative spark after 3 years on tour, but also recorded the sounds of nature for use in their new songs. For me, it was just let's get out, let's step outside the box, Ben Peters told DW at an electronic music conference in Amsterdam. We kicked down the four walls of our studio and let the rest of the world in. Recording in the desert. You might think the desert's a less than ideal place to record music, especially when compared to a soundproofed studio. But the trio, whose music combines electronic beats with live vocals and musical instruments, discovered that the great outdoors was better, in places, than a padded room. You're outside. There are no walls to mess with your recording. Exactly what comes out of the instrument goes into the microphone, says Peters. So you get an absolutely pure recording. That's what studios have been aspiring to achieve since the invention of the recording studio. Peters designed a special mobile recording studio complete with solar panels, a laptop, and microphones to capture Hendrix's vocals and Hansman's saxophone riffs. The group recorded in the Republic of Namibia, the world's second most sparsely populated nation. This meant no sounds from cars, people, or other parts of modern life. A lack of desert winds during the summer helped create ideal outdoor recording conditions. Sound Safari. GoodLuck's album begins with the sound of their cars creeping to a halt in the desert. The engines spluttered and crickets chirped in the background. The following songs feature even more creative acoustics. The group crisscrossed the desert on the Sound Safari, recording natural sounds as substitutes for what would normally be created electronically. Along the way, Peters found volcanic rocks with a high metal content. He struck them with drumsticks, turning the stones into an impromptu saxophone for use as background noise. The group recorded waves crashing on the shore and the crackle of a dying campfire. We thought if we're going to go out there, then we should at least try to find some interesting things, Peters recalls. I don't need a synthesizer to do that. There's the ocean right there. There's a wind right there. That is real white noise that exists in nature. You don't need a little piece of electronic equipment to do it for you. Duet with the Zebra. The album is titled Creatures of the Night, and in fact, one song features the vocals of a zebra, recorded with a directional microphone as the band's caravan became surrounded by a herd of zebra in a nature reserve. There must have been about 1,000 of them, and they were just kicking up a storm and screaming at each other. It's a crazy, crazy sound. It sounds like someone whooping, says Peter. By chance, the zebra calls matches perfectly with the few bars of a trumpet the band had recorded earlier. Peter simply pasted the zebra sounds into his audio editing software and mixed them with the trumpet to create an upbeat staccato duet. I think it was, for me, the cherry on the cake of the whole production to have this sort of moment of luck. The group also took advantage of the natural terrain to achieve sound effects normally done on a computer. to record a delay effect on hardening vocals. They lowered a speaker into the Fish River Canyon, the second largest canyon in the world. As Harding sang, the canyon walls reflected the sound, producing a 3 to 5 second echo. Peters recorded the effect with the microphones suspended in the canyons, and the result is a lo-fi vocal track that would be the envy of any digital sound engineer. The electronic band debate mode used a similar technique when it recorded at Hansa Tone Studio in Berlin in the 1980s. Darling microphones from the top to the bottom of the building were all making the same music. GoodLuck believes their desert recording sessions demonstrate how technology can help bring natural sounds back into electronic music. Now that almost anyone with a laptop and synthesizer software can create a hit song, Peters believes the genre is becoming dominated by electronic sounds and beats that sound similar. Everything is a homogenized result of a synthesizer that everybody owns. We're all making the same music because we're all using the same tools, said Peters. The first electronic guys were sampling funk records that were played by these crazy artists from the States and from all over the world. And nowadays, no one's doing that anymore. Found sounds. You could say the band is part of a counter movement in electronic music, emphasizing real-world sounds. Most recently, so-called found sounds have been used to great effort by Berlin DJ Paul Kalkbrenner, who recorded the sounds of Berlin's S-Bahn commuter trains for one of his songs. The Danish group Alpha Klein recorded their album Pyramida on location at an abandoned Soviet mining village, and British DJ Marcel Herbert based an entire album on the sounds of the life cycle of a pig. But no matter how bizarre these real-world sounds become, the music still has to sound good. At the end of the day, music is about songs, and that's what the public loves, Peter said. It doesn't matter if you're putting in zebras or recording outside or recording in your little bedroom. If you're not making real good music, you're not making real good music. As the technology behind electronic music continues to evolve, it's impossible to predict where the genre will go next. But GoodLuck hopes more DJs will venture out of their studios and discover the sounds of the world around them. Deserted Syrian children flee to Lebanon. According to UNICEF, thousands of Syrian children are fleeing their country alone, separated from their families and forced to survive on their own. They face high risk of abuse and violence. 7-year-old Abdallah says he doesn't know how long he has been in Lebanon for. Sitting in the sun in the playground of Home of Hope, a shelter for street children in Lebanon, he recalls the first day he arrived at the shelter. When I arrived, there was a party with the other children. They gave me a gift, some slippers and some clothes, he told DW. Abdallah fled Idlib in Syria with his uncle a few months ago, after his family was killed in bombardments. After living in a church for a couple of weeks, the young boy and his uncle were arrested. Abdallah says his uncle abandoned him at the shelter and never came back. There was a war in my country. A bomb fell on my house and the house exploded. I didn't have a home anymore, so I came to Lebanon. I don't know where my family is. Maybe they are dead, he said calmly. Since the war in Syria started 2 years ago, more and more children have been escaping their country alone or have been abandoned by their relatives in neighboring countries. A recent report by the United Nations revealed that more than 4,000 Syrian children have crossed borders into neighboring countries without parents or adult relatives. On their own, in Lebanon, between 800 and 2,500 children are unaccompanied or have been separated from their families, according to UNICEF. One Syrian child arrived at the shelter covered with blood. Someone had tried to rape him. He got in a fight and his aggressor hit him with a rock. He told us that he had been living in the streets for 2 months because his parents had abandoned him in Lebanon. His stepmother didn't want him. Maher Tambarani, director of Hope, told DW. In the past years alone, 20 unaccompanied Syrian children were sent to his shelter. Most of these children's parents were either dead or forced to fight in Syria. The kids come by themselves from Syria and have to work to survive. Most of them are aged between 7 and 12. Sometimes, after 5 or 6 months, their mother shows up again to take them back to Syria, he added. According to Anasons McDonald, chef of the Child Protection Service at UNICEF Lebanon, the country has witnessed a significant increase of Syrian children working in the streets in the past 6 months. Children are forced to work because of the harsh economic situation. Some have even become the primary breadwinners of their family. It clearly exposes them, in many cases, to risk from adult abuse and violence. In the rural regions, some of the children are involved in agricultural labor, and we hear about some of these children being beaten, mistreated, and exposed to the use of dangerous tools and machinery. In some cases, we heard about young girls married off, he explains. Taking children off the streets. In the impoverished Armenian municipality of Virgil Hamud, close to Beirut, the center movement social works to get children off the streets. It caters to around 600 children a week, including Syrian refugees. Today, about 20 of them are gathered in a small classroom for their English class. They are all between 8 and 12 years old, but when the teacher asks them who has already been forced to work, 6 little hands are raised. 13-year-old Ivan is one of them. Originally from Aleppo. He arrived in Lebanon a year and a half ago. He has already worked in several shops across the capital. He says long working hours are tiring, and his employers sometimes treat him badly. One of my bosses would always yell at me, and I would only get paid $20 a week. I am tired at night. I work in a new nargile shop now. I still don't know how much I will get paid, but I am happy I have work, said Yvonne, who works before and after school every day until 10:30 p.m. There are about 200 Syrian children at our center. They had to work to support their family, explains the director of Movement Social, Freerose Salman. She says that her first objective is to take the children off the street and to put them in school. We try to explain to the parents and the employers the dangers of the streets and the necessity of school. Education impasse. But Syrian children face many difficulties with the Lebanese school system. Unlike in Syria, math and sciences are taught in English. Many young children also never had the chance to enter the school system in Syria because of the war. On the other hand, Lebanese public schools don't have enough places to absorb the increasing number of Syrian children. According to the UNHCR, approximately 90% of Syrian refugee children are aged 6 to 17 are out of school and lack access to education due to the limited capacity of Lebanon's public school system. 300,000 Lebanese students and 30,000 Syrian refugee children are currently enrolled in public schools. The Lebanese Ministry of Education and Higher Education, MEHE, recently agreed to increase the current school's capacity by putting in place a second shift in 70 schools for the year 2013 to 2014. This initiative would provide seats for 210,000 Syrian children. However, with no end in sight to the conflict, people like Mahar Tabarani says it is very hard to predict what will happen to these children. It is very difficult to build a future for these kids in Lebanon. Many of them don't even have an ID here. The only things we can do is wait and see what will happen to Syria. Maybe their parents are still alive somewhere, waiting for a chance to come and get them, he says. Syrian war turmoil divides Golan Heights residents. Following the 1967 war, Israel annexed the Syrian Golan Heights, prohibiting access to the Syrian community residing on the other side. But a fence separating relatives is not the only thing causing a division. The narrow two-lane road becomes increasingly steeper as it climbs along the Israel-Syrian border. Artillery shells explode every day on the Syrian side as government soldiers fight rebel faction. For many years, relatives gathered here in the town of Madasham to shout greetings to relatives using bullhorns. It was known as the shouting fence and was the only way families could communicate after being separated by the 1967 1967 war between Israel and Syria. Nowadays, cell phones, Facebook, and email have mostly replaced the bullhorns. But as the Syrian civil war destroyed mobile phones, towers, and slowed internet connections to a crawl, the shouting fence came back into fashion. People use Skype and the internet to communicate with their relatives, said Maryam Ajami, whose apartment overlooks the fence. But there are problems with communication now. I used to contact my relatives by Skype, but now we go over there, to the roof of that restaurant, and talk to each other over a public address system. The shouting fence is just one reminder that Israel conquered and annexed this area after the 1967 Six-Day War. A large majority of the 20,000 Arab residents here have refused Israeli citizenship and want to live in Syria, according to Akbar Abu Shahan, an elementary school teacher living in the Golan. He noted that economic conditions are much better in Israel, but he quoted Jesus that man does not live by bread alone. My history, culture, my family, and I belong to Syria, Shahan said. A divided community. Given the civil war across the border, however, the question arises, to which Syria would Golan return? That question has split residents into pro- and anti-government factions. Shahan and many Golan residents are Druze, an Islamic minority group in Syria. The war affects him personally because he feels extremist rebels will persecute minorities if they came to power. It's important for me not to live in a religious country, but in a secular country, said Shahan. It's important for Syria to remain a state for all its people. Shahan stridently supports President Bashar al-Assad, echoing the Syrian government's argument that outside forces created the uprising. He argued that even before the Tunisian uprising that initiated the Arab Spring, imperialist powers were plotting against Syria. I think it was an international conspiracy on Syria from the very beginning, said Shahan. Maybe the CIA or other agents took many young people from Arab countries to Western Europe to train them. It will take time, but other Golan residents said the uprising reflects genuine popular discontent with the Syrian government. Dr. Ali Abu Awad favors the rebels' Free Syrian Army and has suffered the consequences. He said pro-Assad militants firebombed his car and attempted to burn down his house. Assad, the director, makes Syria a desert politically, he said. It will take time to make democracy in Syria, but we have a history. We have people who can do that. Officially, Israel proclaims its neutrality in Syria's civil war. Assad is considered to be a serious enemy of Israel because he is firmly in the Iranian-led camp, said Mark Heller, an analyst with the Institute for National Security Studies in Tel Aviv. On the other hand, there was some appreciation of the fact that the Assad regime, son and father before him, had maintained a quiet relationship directly across the Syrian-Israeli border. Hadler said Israeli leaders initially thought Assad would be overthrown quickly, but they adjusted their policies the longer Assad stayed in power. People are in a watch and wait mood. But critics says Israel is not neutral. Local hospitals provide medical assistance to Syrian civilians and free Syrian army fighters. Israel strongly backed proposed U.S. bombing of Syria last August in response to charges that Syria used chemical weapons. Critics says Israel wants all sides to exhaust themselves fighting, leading eventually to the rise of a new strongman as in Egypt, where the military now holds power. Hanan Ashrawi, a member of the Palestine Liberation Organization Executive Committee living in Ramallah, said Israel has a long history of allying with Arab dictators. Dealing with dictators is much easier, she said. The U.S. has been dealing with dictators for years. All you have to do is convince the big man, and generally they are men. Unlike Israel, Palestine leaders in the West Bank claim they are genuinely neutral. Ashrawi said that while Palestinians sympathize with the popular uprising in Syria, the West Bank leadership doesn't take sides. We have Palestinians in every neighboring country that are vulnerable, said Ashrawi. Any side you take, the Palestinian will pay the price. We are in principle on the side of the people, and of course on the side of human rights, democracy, and rule of law. All we know is that violence won't solve anything. Back to the Golan, residents continue to worry about the fallout from Syria and are waiting for some resolution to the conflict. When asked if he could predict when the Syrian war will end, rebel supporters Awad replied, "God knows if he knows."